The MK party says that on Tuesday it's 58 MPs. The MK party won 58 seats in the National Assembly. Those MPs will be sworn in on Tuesday, among them being the former judge president of the Western Cape province, John Hlophe. Remember, the same John Hlophe who became the first jurist in South Africa to be impeached. But here's where it becomes interesting. We have the body called the Judicial Services Commission, who interviews potential judges of the various courts in South Africa. They're also largely the disciplinary body if there are issues that need to be discussed around discipline of judges. This is the same body that recommended that John Hlophe be impeached. Now, the rules say that the official opposition or members of the opposition have 3 seats on that JSC. And with the MK party being the official opposition in South Africa, because the Democratic Alliance, IFP, PA, they're all part of the Government of National Unity, it's now up to the MK party to deploy members to the JSC. But think about that. An impeached judge could now be sitting on the same panel with the colleagues who recommended that he be impeached. Mbekezeli Benjamin is a researcher and advocacy officer at Judges Matter. Mbekezeli, we have to also ask the question first. Yes, there are 3 criteria to become an MP in South Africa. You need to be over the age of 18. You have to be not be insolvent, and also if you've been sentenced to more than 12 months imprisonment and that hasn't lapsed over a 5-year period, you're not allowed. But simply over the issue of an impeached person, do you think there needs to be some contestation around that particular eligibility of being an MP? Because surely someone who has been impeached in the public eye, I believe, should not even be a public representative in the Republic of South Africa. Mbekezeli?
Good morning, Lester, and good morning to the listeners. I do think that it is long overdue that we upgrade the criteria for one to become an MP, because a member of parliament really is someone who is supposed to make the law, but also is supposed to have oversight over the government. So you do expect that the people who will be doing that very important job are people who are responsible, people who we trust as leaders, and people who have the highest ethical and moral standards. And so I think it is long overdue that we do revise how people become MPs. The criteria that we currently have, the main disqualifiers really don't quite relate to the important job that an MP is supposed to do. So I agree with you 100% that we do need stricter criteria.
Look, the framers of our constitution would not have foreseen that in 28, 30 years of a new South Africa and a new constitution, that there would be a fellow by the name of Judge John Hlophe, who was found to have influence or attempted to influence judges on the constitutional court, found then to be impeachable by the JSC, and then a National Assembly Parliament for the first time voting to then impeach a sitting judge president, then leaves the bench, but then joins a political party and then stands as a candidate or as an MP, and then that political party being recognized as the official opposition. I can be very sympathetic to our framers of the Constitution who may not have seen this particular scenario.
Yeah, look, it is valid that they could not have anticipated that people who are impeached by Parliament can later return and become members of that same Parliament. Because in as much as it's now Mr. Hlophe, it's no longer Judge Hlophe, but it's now Mr. Hlophe, now joins Busi Mkhwebane, who was also impeached by Parliament and later came back as a member of Parliament. So it is quite an interesting development, and you're quite right. The drafters of the Constitution could never ever have anticipated such a situation. It was historic that it happened in the last year, But it is quite something that is now a second person who's been impeached by Parliament, who now goes back and becomes a member of that same Parliament that impeached them without at least skipping a beat or waiting a moment to sort of rehabilitate yourself in the eyes of the public.
Just what would John Hlophe do on the Judicial Services Commission, and why could this be such a conflict of interest?
Well, look, firstly, it is not a given that he will become a member of the JSC, because what is required in terms of Parliament, they are supposed to be nominated by their political party, but they have to be voted on by the rest of the members of Parliament, because it is the members of Parliament who designate people to become members of the Judicial Service Commission, people who become members of the Magistrates Commission, and also those who represent the South African Parliament at the Pan-African Parliament or at global institutions where Parliament is supposed to set a delegation. So it is not a given. It is still subject to an election. But yes, if he was to become a member of the Judicial Service Commission, there would be an awkwardness to it, because he would be someone who was a member of the judiciary. So in terms of the JSC, there are members who are designated by, for example, the judge's president to sit on the JSC, and he was at some point one of those people. Now to come back and sit on a different seat on the JSC would be awkward, and I do imagine that he would spend quite a bit of time sort of relitigating or fighting old battles. And so I think that would be something that we can anticipate.
Yeah. You're right that MPs would need to vote on this list that is nominated, but I don't think that we've had an instance where an MP who has been nominated has been vetoed. Currently, MPs on that list, or former MPs, and the former deployment was the Speaker, Nosiviwe Mapisa Kakula, Glenys Breitenbach of the DA, Mr. Mkwanashe of the IFP, Julius Malema was a member of the JS of the JSE, Naren Singh of the IFP. So we don't really have a culture of the National Assembly vetoing any of these deployments. Do you think that we may see it this time if John Hlophe is nominated by the MK party?
We might. I don't know, but I suspect we might, because in fact in 2014 the Democratic Alliance wanted to nominate someone called Eric Smith, who was a member of the National Council of Provinces, and the other parties objected to his nomination, and eventually it went to a vote, and according to the vote, he was not nominated as one of those people. So when it came to the vote, he, as a member of the DA, he was not elected. But in terms of the National Assembly, we don't really have a history, but it doesn't mean that it won't necessarily happen this time. Because what usually happens is the parties nominate people, and then the chief whips will sit down and say, look, get another person, or we won't vote for this person. So they try to find consensus on candidates who are nominated to be members of these other bodies. But if they can't find consensus, then it is subject to a vote. Up to this point, the nominees have really gone through a consensus process, but there's nothing really that says they can't subject it to a vote. And from that vote, it is quite possible that Mr. Hlophe will not actually be nominated as one of those people to go to the JSC.
Really appreciate your time. Mbekezeli Benjamin, Advocacy Officer at Judges Matter. Lester, how can Hlophe be allowed to take up a seat in Parliament if he was found to be corrupt? This is exactly what South Africans did not vote for. He was not found to be corrupt by a court. He was found that his conduct in trying to influence judges on the Constitutional Court, that the JSC found to be an impeachable offence. And then for the first time, late last year, the South African Parliament impeached a sitting judge. It's never happened before in the history of a democratic South Africa.